The session is more to educate you about what we talk about traditional identity and access management and how some of these controls can be implemented as services from the cloud. Obviously, as you've heard about, and what we're talking nowadays is getting software as a service, right? So now we're talking about getting security as a service. Security traditionally has always been more of an on-premise kind of installation. You buy security software, you install it on-premise, you implement policies. Now we want to extend some of the same models to say how we can deliver them as services from the cloud. And more importantly, if you're considering putting applications on the cloud, how does your MSP or cloud service provider assure you that your data is safe and secure, right? So these are some of the aspects that we want to talk about. I'd like to keep it interactive, so if you have any questions even during the presentation, please feel free to stop me. Consumerization of IT is something that we've seen. I don't have to spend a lot of time. I'm sure you all understand why security is important, right? Security will always significantly increase because there's so many more devices, social tools, cloud services, more ways to get access to data. That is the key there, right? As and when you increase access, you give transparency, you say make it easy for people to gain access to data. There are always issues of security, right? How do you control the access? How do you know which user is getting the right access? Right? These are all issues that come with the ease of use of making information available, of making critical information available, right? Whether it's to your customers, your partners, your employees, your vendors, anyone, right? Or even third-party people. What's important here is content and context will become more important, right? You have to know what is the content of the data to determine access decisions. So we talk about information control. It's not enough to say that this person should access this data. This person should access this data only if it is of relevance, right? So you have to have some method of classification of data, right? It's always important to assign decision points based on classification. Partial transfer of control from IT to the consumer. Obviously, users will need to use more consumer devices and IT has to embrace them. Now today, if you join an organization, you get a BlackBerry. Many times organizations force you to take BlackBerry. They have to. We have email comes. So that means anytime you go in, and recently at CA, for example, only BlackBerry was allowed, there was no iPhone. People started complaining, saying, no, I want to use my iPhone to get my email. So then the CA IT department finally, after a lot of going back and forth, said, okay, fine. So that's what happens, right? More and more people want access to different methods. Now, as a security concern, you have to then figure out, okay, how do you control the access? Who has access? When should they get access? Why should they get access? Based on what they should get access? So these are all questions that come up. More and more devices, more and more tools, right? And obviously, you have to have cooperation from the business in order to do this, because after all, these applications are putting up on the cloud. You're putting all these apps out there. What is the security concerns, right? So you need to have cooperation as well. So what is the traditional problem with some of the existing security models, right? We talk about your traditional role-based access control models. Why can't they keep up? It's not so much that they can't keep up, it's just there's so many of them. Every new application that comes in has its own security model, right? You have to create a user, you have to create a role, you have to put some policies in place. As you add more and more applications, there's more and more of these models. How do you keep up with them, right? So that's one of the challenges that we see. Lack of control and visibility. You want to have one central place where you have access to all this information. May or may not be possible, right? As you keep adding more and more security models in there, it's not easy to get all this information in one cohesive view to say that, listen, I want to be able to see the access of all my users across all the applications. What access does this person have across all the different apps? That if each app has its own security model, it's managed from a different location. How do you get that visibility, right? Risk, privacy, and compliance challenges, obviously we all are aware of that, right? Every industry has compliance challenges, whether you're banking, finance, healthcare, whatever, government sector. You have to keep track. Every application that comes up, every security control that comes up, you have certain implications for regulation, for privacy, confidentiality. How do you keep track of all of that? And then, obviously it has to support business growth, right? Existing security models, when it says cannot support business growth, all we're trying to say is that security should not be a hindrance to business growth. If I want to deliver a new service, whether it's from the cloud or from anywhere, security should not be a concern. I shouldn't think, no, I'm not going to deliver this service because there are security concerns. Security should not inhibit the business, right? So that's the goal here. So we are trying to say that it's easy to have existing security models keep up to all these constant changes. Okay, and of course, evolving trends and technologies, there's always financial constraints. And new emerging threats, we talk about hackers and people trying to break in, getting access to data, that's always there, right? So all of these constraints have to be kept in mind. So what we're saying is control is important, centralized control, right? It's always good to have, control and business enablement, which we call true information security, right? Whether it's customers, partners, consumer devices, whether it's cloud, on-premise, anything. You want to have a centralized, cohesive control where you can say, okay, I have access, or I can get the access to all my users, what they have access to, what they should do, what they shouldn't do, when they should do it, and so on. Right? You want to have it all from one place. So that's the security mindset needed for the future. Any questions or comments? So we talk about a unified approach to secure business enablement, moving from the security of no. So we all understand what the security of NO is, right? Everybody has antivirus, you have spyware, vulnerability management, and so on and so forth, right? Infrastructure security, what we call. So now we want to go into the security of no, the KNOW. You need to know, what your user access is, your data is, your activity is, right? So that is what we call the service security. Whether it's web servers, applications, privileged users, regular servers, web services, all of these different components put together, right? Each new application comes in, probably falls into one of those buckets over there, right? So you want to start a new service, you need to have the ability to know what the access levels are and who has the access, right? So we want to try and get to this new model. This is a unified approach to secure business enablement. So we are saying from here, we want to get to the no part, the NO to the KNOW. So when we talk about the security building blocks of success, right? So let's forget about cloud security for a second. Talk about security in general. How do you get to this KNOW? So we are all saying that fine, you need to know all your users, all their accesses. How do you get to that? The first step is to be able to control identities. I don't know if it's clear or not. It's managing and governing identities based on what access, based on a role. Very important, right? Anytime you create a new user in an organization, they have to have certain rights and privileges associated with that user, right? It could be based on their role, which is their job function. Could be maybe, say, accounting, system administrator, finance, marketing, whatever it is, right? You need to be able to first manage the identity. When the user joins an organization, how do they get access to all the different applications, all the different operating systems, right? There has to be a process in place for you to be able to manage that. And so once the user gets access, what access does the user get? Okay, you need to have some sort of a template that defines the access of every user on every application. So for example, if I am a system administrator, I join an organization, my ID has to have certain privileges on Windows in order for me to do my job. I have to have domain admin rights, for example, right? Because if I log into Windows and I'm a system admin, I need to do some upgrades or patching or whatever. If I log into Unix, I need to have root access. If I log in to a database, I need to have DBA or DBA rights. So these are all rights and associations are associated with the role. And the role is associated with the user. So my name is Sumanth, I'm a system admin. If I'm joined to a role called a system administrator, I should automatically get all the associated rights associated with that role. Right? Kind of makes sense? It's easy enough to say, but then the question is, how do you integrate all these role models? And that is the challenge that organizations face, right? So you have Windows, Unix, Oracle, that's all fine. Typical operating systems, databases. There are a lot of third-party applications. Even those role models have to be integrated into your identity management. So identity management is the process of managing and governing all these identities. From hire to retire is the term that we call it, right? So when you join the organization, you get provisioned. Provisioning is the actual process of creating the user on all the different operating systems and applications. Provisioning, deprovisioning. Right? I provision the user as part of the role. They get access to all their different applications. Once they leave the organization, from a central place, I can then deprovision the user, and then the users are automatically removed. If somebody changes their job, I can automatically take them from one role, put them in another role. They will have access rights associated with the new role and lose all their access rights that were associated with the previous role. Kind of makes sense? So this is where we're talking about transparency of access. It's easy. The user doesn't need to know anything, right? Today I'm in system admin, maybe I move into marketing. I did my MBA 2 years later and now I applied for a role in marketing, I got it. But my access rights shouldn't be the same. I shouldn't need to have Windows administrator access and root access on Unix if I'm a marketing guy. So who's going to change that in an organization, right? That's what happens is many times you people move from one position to another, but your access doesn't change as much, because nobody forgets, oh, Sumanth is no longer in this role, let's remove his ID. Right? So there has to be an easier way to manage this activity. That is why we call it the KNOW. If you know that Sumanth was already a system admin and he had all this access, I can then easily say that, okay, now tomorrow you're in marketing, you therefore don't need all this access, and your role will determine what your access is. And there is an easy way for you to say, okay, I'm going to move you from this role to this role, and all your access rights have changed. Does it make sense? Right? So that's what we're talking about, KNOW, right? How do you get that visibility, right? Is to first of all be able to manage the identity, and then control what access they have based on their role. Now, what is second? See, once I provision a user, they get access into a certain application or an operating system. What can they do once they get in? That's called access, control access, right? Whether it's system or application, whether it's physical, cloud, virtual, doesn't matter what the environment is. Once I provision a user, the user gets access to an application or to a server or to any other platform. How does the security model govern what access they should have? So we said that Sumanth needs root access because he's a system administrator. Once you log into the server, what access should you have? Are you able to delete files? Are you only able to backup? Are you only able to do some other function? So that is again very important as well, right? So while you're controlling the identity, you also have to control what access people have, whether it's a server, whether it's an application, whether it's an operating system, whatever it is, right? You need to be able to have another security model, and that security model has to tie back to the identity model. Why? Because that's the only way I can easily say, tomorrow there's a new system admin, I just put him in this role, automatically he will get all the templates associated. So if my template has all the right permissions that says on Unix, if somebody joins this role, they will have all these specific rights and privileges, then the next time I can just put the user into the role. And then I know from one central location, I can say, yes, Sumanth has all of these different access rights, right? That's what, again, going back into that security of, that visibility of KNOW. Right? Called access, controlling the access. Third part is the information. See, now we talk about access policies, right? We said that, okay, you're supposed to access a file or a database or a folder or whatever it is, right? Based on some predefined role. We are saying that HR can access HR data, finance can access payroll data, whatever your policies have put in place. But the question is, what do you do with that data? Fine, if you have a policy that says finance can access payroll file or payroll data, maybe they have to, right? Because that's part of their job responsibility. Again, it's part of the role. But how do they access it? Yes, the finance function can maybe read the payroll file. Are they allowed to send it out, copy on USB drive? Can they email the file out to somebody on the Hotmail account? No. Controlling the use of the information is also important. It's not just enough to say that finance can access payroll. How do you use the information you get access to? Governing information use policies is also very important, right? So that's why we talk about content and classification of data. So how do I know that the payroll file is important? I have to classify it some way to say this is an important file, and this determines what are the use policies for this file. It's not enough to say that people can access the file. How can they use the data? That's also equally important, okay? So that's why we talk about content and classification of data. Like we said earlier, and one of the security, challenges, or rather the mindset for the future, right? So this put together, is what we, call the intelligence portion, right? So now having a cohesive platform to say that from one location, I can look and say that this user has access to all these different applications, and within each application or within each system, they have access to a specific set of data, right? And that's the intelligence that, we can come up with. So what we call the security building blocks of success, right? Any questions, comments? Okay, so this is what we've talked about. Is traditional security, nothing to do with cloud. Okay, this is your traditional on-premise. You have a data center, you have servers, you have applications, you have customers, you have partners, you're running your business. You need to have solutions like this, at least to know who has access to what. Now the challenge is, do I really need to have all of this in-house? Can I get some of this as a service? How secure is it, even if I'm getting other applications as a service? Does my cloud provider give me the guarantee that my data is safe, right? So how do we transition to the cloud? Right, so from the traditional IAM context, now we go into the to, for, and the from. The three kind of silos, or not silos, I should say, three methodologies, of cloud security. So which we'll talk through each one of them. So when we're talking about extending on-premise IAM to cloud applications, what does that mean? So on-premise is your traditional identity management, role management, access management. You're all familiar with terms like single sign-on, federation, right? Single sign-on, one access, I get one ID password gets me access to all the apps. Federation means two companies trust each other's authentication data. And if I sign on to one organization, I can then, without another sign-on, I can be processed into another organization's, user repository based on the trust that is established between the two organizations, right? These are all terms that we use in the IAM space, right? So for example, at CA, let me talk about CA and what we do, just to give you an idea of, what we're talking about cloud security or just cloud in general, right? So we use SFDC, Salesforce.com for our CRM, right? As you all know, SFDC is a 100% cloud delivered solution. We have no servers, nothing. We only use our browsers. All of our data, including our opportunity, lead management, tender bid information, everything is stored in SFDC, right? Now, how safe is it? SFDC has to assure me in CA that yes, all your information is safe, that nobody can go and access that data, because if they see all the bids, that's confidential proprietary information as far as the company is concerned, right? Because we bid against large bids with other organizations. But again, so that's an example of how we are consuming a cloud service. I just use my browser, I log into SFDC, I look at all my opportunities, my leads, that's it, right? No data in-house. Now what happens is we control that and provide single sign-on. What do we do is in-house when we provision users, we provision the user into SFDC as well. So when I join CA, I'm going to a role. Let's say I'm in sales or I'm in system admin. If I'm in system admin, I wouldn't get access to SFDC. So I'm in sales. I automatically get provisioned into Salesforce.com. And that way I can use the same login when I go to SFDC. I don't have to, again, have a different login. I use the same ID and password that I use to log into my Active Directory account in CA when I go to the office or when I come in through the VPN, right? So that is, again, as an example of extending on-premise. So we have an on-premise solution, that is identity management, our own, for provisioning our users, and then we have extended it to provision into cloud apps. So you can use existing identity management applications to provision to cloud applications like Google Apps, Salesforce, and so on, using federation or what we call SAML, SAML tokens, for those of you who are familiar with, security assertion markup language. It's a methodology for transferring the information in a token, and that token goes to Salesforce, and that's how they create the user in their data store. So I can use the same ID and password to access both CA as well as SFDC, right? So you provision, deprovision. So major cloud services provide support identity federation. WebEx, Google, Microsoft, they all do, right? So this is an example of how you can leverage your on-premise, if any of you have identity management products, whether it's CA or non-CA or any other product for that matter, you can use federation and SAML to provision to cloud applications. Okay, any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Complexities are the contracts and managing the account.
Yes.
Right? So, since being in information security, I want to know, how do we ensure the accountabilities are properly fixed? In case in the current scenario of what you are using, CA using federated services with SFDC or Salesforce.com, in such scenario, who will be managing this access management as a whole, and who will be accountable, and how this interconnection happens?
It's a good question, right? So from our side, obviously we have an internal IT department, and they will be managing it, so it's not me. So it will be the internal IT department. When they do the provisioning of users, they have to manage all the security that's associated. And obviously SAML has a protocol. It's safe and secure. They use whatever protocols are there today to transfer the tokens over to SFDC, and that's an internal process that has to be set up. So when you're setting up federation between two organizations, there are certain controls and steps and controls that you have to take. And once you do that, then you can pass the information between the two organizations. So normally, just like you would pass it internally within your own organization. So, and it's only a one-time setup, right? So it's not like information is constantly being exchanged. So that is the part that makes it easier, right? When I join CA, automatically my ID goes there. But that's it. After that, unless there is a change, there is no information that's transferred between one and two.
Okay, let me just clear my mind. Sorry
Sure.
to add on. In case, and imagine a scenario, I am an employee of your company and I am leaving today, right? And the request goes to the IT department to delete it, right? So what is the process happens that who takes care of the complete association deletion, so that I don't have access to any of them, neither the CA or Salesforce or any.
The IT administrator, right? So we have an IT administrator. The IT administrative team, you open a service desk ticket, it automatically goes to the IT administration team, and they will delete your ID. Automatically, you get deprovisioned on all the applications, including SFDC, because the SAML token will go, and then whenever it goes, automatically you will be disabled. So it's just a matter of looking at your ID, and then because we already have the association between the user and all the different IDs, that's why we talk about role management as being so important, right? I know that if Sumanth leaves CA tomorrow, what all access does Sumanth have, right? Whether it's Salesforce and all the different applications, you'll be automatically deleted from there, right? So that is a function of IT, of internal IT at CA.
Okay. If it is so simple, thank you.
I wish it was. Maybe it's not as simple, and I'm simplifying it. But again, I'd have to look at it more from the operations standpoint to give you a better picture. But that's the general picture, though. That is, the general process. Okay, maybe it's not as easy as I say it, a click of a button and you're gone. But it is fairly easy. It's at least more streamlined. I'll put it that way. It is streamlined. Right, because I know what access everybody has, it's much easier for me to do it. Think about it, if I didn't have that, how would you do it? If I have access to 20 applications, then I have to go to each application, call up each manager and say, okay, Sumanth is leaving, please delete, right? So at least that process has become simpler, right? So let's agree. So like we said, we cannot solve everything, but you can at least streamline it to a certain extent by getting, the access information and identity information in one place. That's all. Yes, of course. Everything. Auditing accountability of what? I'm sorry.
Like the access. Say for example, the Salesforce domain is particularly for your company, and if somebody else is accessing
Yes.
as a service on the cloud.
Correct. Yeah, Salesforce has to assure us that our data is safe. That's what I said, right? So that is they have to assure us that nobody else is looking at our data. Nobody is going and logging into our data and looking at all our leads and all our numbers and all our, yeah, absolutely. So
Within the Salesforce, if there are privileges, that again has to be taken care of.
by them only, exactly, correct. Because I have certain views, and because I'm in a certain rank, maybe somebody who's in a higher rank has a bigger view. Yeah, all of that role-based model is complete in Salesforce. They have different rights. So when you apply for an account, you'll automatically be provisioned based on whatever level you are, and you only have that access.
Provisioning and deprovisioning, like Salesforce is one example of cloud app. Provisioning and deprovisioning in the cloud app, seamless or is it
You have to set up the federation, right? That's what we said. So once you set up the federation and the SAML tokens are exchanged, then it is somewhat seamless. It's at least streamlined, right? You create, it'll create. You delete, it'll delete. So that process is there, but you have to set up the federation for that. It's called identity federation, right? That's what we talked about.
Possibly, can I add something to it?
Yeah.
As you said, I think the process of deprovisioning users is streamlined. But the problem might come with respect to mobile devices, data stored in the mobile devices.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's going to add more complexity.
Much more.
The other process is definitely much streamlined, and because of SAML association, it's much more easier.
Correct, absolutely. That's very right, sir. Yeah, if you have mobile devices, then you have to get the device, you have to wipe the device. Can you wipe it remotely? So that's why we said consumerization, right? Consumerization adds to the challenge of security. Absolutely. So that makes it so you have to get hold of the person, or can you wipe it remotely? Right? There are solutions where you can wipe the data remotely. If I know that somebody is left, they don't turn in their cell phone or their BlackBerry, which has all corporate data on it, I need to be able to wipe it remotely. Right, so these are all challenges that come up. Yes, sir.
How would you ensure that somebody from Salesforce is not illegally accessing, updating your data? And do you have audit privileges to ensure, to check whether somebody is actually accessing the data or not?
It's a good question. The gentleman just asked the same question, right? I personally, I don't know. So that is something that hopefully our IT department has done their due diligence to get that assurance from Salesforce that our data is safe. But I'm only a user in this case of the service, so I specifically don't know what assurances they have given us. But given that Salesforce is such a big organization, they're worldwide, they're used by. So it's, I feel it should be fairly okay. I mean, I wouldn't think CA as an organization our size would trust all this critical data to Salesforce if not. So at least when they would have done their due diligence. But honestly, sir, I would not know the actual controls myself, though it would be good to know actually when we talk about this. The second what we're talking about is for the cloud service. Now we are saying, okay, in the cloud, I have identity providers, I have service providers. How do they assure, like we just now you said, sir, how do you assure your customers that the data is safe? You put in access controls, you put in web access management, you put in reporting, you put in privilege management, right? These are all controls that you or Salesforce, for example, can say, yes, I have role-based management, I have reporting. You want to know how your data is safe? You want to know auditing? Here, this is an audit report of all the people who have accessed CA data, right? So these are some of the solutions that are available where you can put in as a service provider to assure your customers and your clients that their data is safe, okay? So that is what we call as for the cloud. And then the third option is then security as a service from the cloud. So now we're saying, as a cloud service provider, as a managed service provider, I want to be able to offer some of these services to my customers, right? Do I have to actually install identity management or access management or single sign-on on-premise, or can I consume these as services from the cloud? Okay? So that is where the paradigm shift is going. So now we are able to offer some of these solutions to say, yes, I want to do provisioning, deprovisioning, yet I don't want to buy all this expensive hardware and software and services and install this whole solution. Can I get it as a service? Right? And that's what cloud is, right? We are talking about getting access of applications delivered to us as services so that we don't have to install it ourselves, manage it, maintain it, etc., etc. All I do is I get it as a service, and then I do my provisioning, I do my deprovisioning, I do my reporting, whatever the services are that are available, right? So like I think we talked about some of this, right? Risk, loss of control, what are the challenges here? Data security, where is the data staying? A lot of times, is the data in the country? Is it outside the country? Does your industry support that? Are there regulations that don't allow you to put your data outside? If you're hosting something on Amazon, that means the data is sitting in the US and you're in India. So does your industry allow you to do that? So a lot of issues come up, right? Encryption is another big issue, it's not here. Regulation. And what is governance? Now you don't have any control over the data, right? Previously it was a server sitting in your data center. You had access to the database, you could run reports. Now you're completely relying on the I got a timeout phase. Okay, anyway, I think I've run out of time, but I just wanted to talk to you just a little bit about what we can. It's not really a product pitch, but just to tell you, these are some of the services that are available, right? So we are talking about identity as a service, single sign-on as a service, two-factor authentication is something everybody is talking about, right? So different services can be consumed from the cloud. 2FA is something that's picking up. A lot of banks in India are talking about two-factor authentication, soft tokens, hard tokens. How can you offer them as services from the cloud? You don't have to actually do on-premise setups for that, right? Again, these are just some use cases. Sorry, I have to rush through. But I'll be happy to take questions offline. We have a booth up front. If anybody has more questions, I'll be out there. Just to talk really about user management and how we can do provisioning from the cloud into your internal enterprise as well. What we call hybrid approach. Sometimes you don't want all your apps to go on the cloud, or maybe all your mission critical apps don't go on the cloud. So in that case, you have a hybrid approach. You say that I will use my on-premise applications, but I can provision to them from a cloud service, which is also possible, right? Your same identity management doesn't have to be hosted in-house. It can be hosted on the cloud, but it can be provisioning your on-premise applications, right? That's what we call the hybrid approach, right? Federation as a service, we talked about federated SSO with cloud applications like Google and Salesforce. So different capabilities. Just to summarize, so what we talk about in this, the new trend for security is, protecting assets and information, compliance, improving speed, and supporting new initiatives. Any closing questions? Yeah? You can sit down, sir, it's okay.
My situation is a little bit different. I come from a background of law and technology. I'm a lawyer, at the same time a technologist. Now, we have a problem, especially when you're looking at the software as a service for lawyers managing the law domain.
Correct.
Unfortunately, from what I have seen, even from the application we developed in Nigeria, back down to Nigeria there, we found it difficult to get the lawyers psychologically attuned to the fact that their data is secured. Because they will begin to tell you, yes, we know all this you just said, there's no problem. But at the end of the day, they tell you that there is this paradigm that says that there's no network that is safe. You see, so they start from that particular given, and given the nature of their situation, and with other countries as well, I believe even in India, I don't think the lawyer's application is even running here on the cloud, servicing the industry. I don't know, because the problem is how do we psychologically, appeal or sell this particular program?
See, but then the network is not safe. I would say that's a tough call, right? Don't we do all commerce and transactions on the internet? Don't we buy stuff from the internet? You're sending your credit card information across the internet. If you're saying that the network is not safe, then we're not doing anything like that. So tell them, don't buy anything from the internet. Don't do any, yes, because you're sending your bank information, you're sending your credit card information, everything is going online. So if the network is not safe, then none of this data is safe, right? So that's where maybe, and it's a tough sell. I mean, but it's a paradigm shift. Remember, security starts with the people, right? It has to come from within the people. You have to have that awareness that, this is secure. So these are just an example I'm giving you. It's a tough answer. I don't know if anybody else has a better answer to give, but how do you convince your lawyers that their data is safe? You can't talk about all of this because they're not going to understand, right? This is not something that's in their domain, right? So you talk about something that's more relevant. You say, yes, you're using online stores, you buy books, yes sir?
Give an example
yes, sir.
You guys can understand. Like, do you keep your jewels at home or in the bank locker?
Yeah, good one, right? So a lot of ways around, right? But I think that's internet banking, e-banking, anything, if you're going to do, then your data is safe. That would be my answer, right? Okay, thank you all very much. Appreciate your attention.
Thank you so much, sir, for the deep insights.